Dante's lava hot.
All right. Good afternoon. Welcome in. It is the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show. And boy, do we have one here for you today. Last week, myself, Ben Rasa here with me. We covered sleepers. We looked deep into the draft and maybe some not so obvious sleepers that people were overlooking earlier in the round. Today, well, we're going to take a little bit of a different spin on drafts, season longs to best balls, and tell you specifically, don't do it. Stay away. Do not draft this individual, no matter how much you want to. Take my money, fill in the blank draft league. In most cases, Underdog for best ball. We'll tell you all about them. Today's going to be the day where myself and more importantly, Ben Rasa is going to yell at you through the screen. Don't do it. What's happening, brother?
What's up, man? Yeah, this is my kind of show, just being a straight hater. It's a situation, and we were talking about this before the show. Obviously, in betting and fantasy and DFS, it's all about relativity. There's a ADP where I would draft every one of the guys we're going to rip on. There's no doubt about it. But the general consensus of what we're going to do here, and that's why the graphic is Odell. He's one of these guys to me. Great talent. I just think overvalued, a lot of risk and not as much reward. And that's what we see in betting. That's what we see in fantasy. And I'm really excited to see kind of who's on your list today of possible do not draft candidates.
Right. And I think there are going to be some obvious names that we won't touch on that are like way too obvious, right? So you're not going to get Carson Wentz today because you'd be a fool anyway. And I would tell you even pre-injury, you'd be a fool to draft him in certain situations. So that's the beauty of it today. And look, I saw one name on the prep sheet that I can't wait for you to get to because he's on my team. And another name that's probably going to shock the world of Philadelphia. Lofty's already calling up saying revoke his Eagles card because, as you mentioned, this is all about perceived value to the return. And I think that is the beauty in looking at rosters, at drafts ahead of the season to where you can kind of look at where people are drafting. ADP is huge, right? Even in best balls that we'll talk about, and get an idea of where people are making a mistake. And I think that's the beauty of being 5-6 weeks out of the season, Ben, is we're already seeing that kind of formulate with draft and ADP.
There's no doubt about it. And that's what I love. It's great to evaluate players. All that stuff is fun. And we've got a great team here at Awesemo that does that far better than I. But the thing that I love most about fantasy and all these things is talking about opportunity cost, talking about that balance of, I kind of like this guy, but the public likes him so much that I actually am not going to be able to draft him because I'm not willing to part. I'm not ranking him inside my top 10 QBs and that people have him there. That's just an opportunity cost I'm not willing to get to. So it's a really fun wrinkle. And it's something I think is underutilized. Most people, they're so concerned about, all right, is this player going to play good or bad this year? They don't think about what is the perception in the general public about these guys. And that can make a huge difference in your leagues.
As mentioned, today's show brought to you and presented by Underdog. And man, as we've been talking about the season just about to start, Underdog has the biggest best ball tournament in history, $3.5 million prize pool, Millie Maker. That's over $1 million to first place. So just continue to tune in to all of our shows and get up to the date NFL news, information, and all of the Underdog best ball tips you can get. And of course, you want to jump on right away and use the promo code we have, Awesemo, to match the $25 deposit. So use that. I use that. Everybody here has used that. It's a great way to kickstart your Underdog account with a free $25 matched here. Just use our promo code Awesemo. All right, so let's jump into this here. And we're going to go, as we did last week, position by position. And I feel like we're probably going to have to remind the audience, who already, I'm sure, has hit us up with a like and subscribe to the channel, as they keep coming in, Ben, that this is not simply, as you mentioned, stay away from a guy because we think he sucks or stay away from a guy because he's trash. I feel like we're going to have to reiterate, especially with our choices here, that this is more about perceived value in the return. So why don't you kick things off and start with the quarterback that you insist the public should not draft?
All right, let's do it. And it's a guy that, again, off-season moves. And we've talked about a lot of the players in these videos, new systems, new spots, new everything. And I think a lot of people, including me, are really excited to see what Matthew Stafford does in LA. He gets into a new situation. He leaves Detroit. I'm very excited to see what Sean McVay can do with him and just see a quarterback. No offense to Jared Goff, but I think Stafford can be an improvement. First thing, got to talk about the injury. Stafford at many times is banged up a lot. He's getting older. I don't know exactly what they'll get from him, but that's always a risk. The thing, again, that troubled me the most is where he's, his ADP is falling around, 85 to 100 QB, fringe 10, 11, 12, 13. I don't see a ton of ceiling. Can he land in there? Absolutely. Do I think he could be a top 5 quarterback this year? I'd say that's very, very doubtful. And there are guys way down. Eytan, you talked about Kirk Cousins on our last video. Justin Fields, I think, has a tremendous ceiling. Trevor Lawrence, we're going to see. Matt Ryan is below him. Baker is below him. All of these are the type of guys that I think you can wait on. And you're going to get a guy, to me, that's a coin toss or maybe even a slight favorite to outperform Stafford. So again, not knocking Stafford because of the talent. It's more that I think people are overrating the situation he's coming into. And I was pretty stunned to see him on the fringe of QB 10s in a lot of drafts.
I'm guessing you haven't placed a juicy futures bet, Stafford plus 1,600 to win the MVP, which is absurdly low anyway, right?
Can't say that's on the docket. And that really speaks to the lack of ceiling. I think he could be very effective this year. I think he could land kind of where he's at. I just don't see that many scenarios where he is just absolutely torching it and he kind of knocks on that door of the next tier of QBs that people are really going to. So I don't see a ton of reward and I see a lot of risk, and that's the obvious candidate for me with QBs. But you said early in the show, you might have your Eagles card revoked.
It's coming.
Is it coming? Okay.
It's coming.
And
here's the thing. I think that there is a theme here that we're going to explore that you bring up, which is fresh, new people, new talent, especially at the quarterback position, which down the line, when we talk about other positions, Ben, new quarterbacks, either in a new position or just new to the league, are going to impact who they throw the football to, obviously. So with all of this said, Jalen Hurts was not great last year. He was better than Carson Wentz, which you were better than Carson Wentz last year. So the bar was set so incredibly low that Jalen Hurts was just a breath of fresh air. Look, Hurts can move. He can move with his feet. He was definitely able to get out of some trouble that I would argue he created by holding the football too long. And that's not always a saving grace when defenses know that you're now the starting quarterback and they're going to be game planning for you. My point here is this. I don't think that Jalen Hurts is a bad quarterback in the NFL. I don't think that he can have a decent to quasi-good season in the NFL. I just don't see it happening this year. Way too many new pieces around him. He's going from Doug Peterson to Sirianni this year. I cover this team, Ben. I can't even tell you what offense they're going to run. Why? Why would you take him as your 10 to 12 quarterback? Why would you take him 80 in ADP when there are so many unknowns? You're right to look at Stafford and say, at least there's a known with the injury that adds to the concern. My whole argument with Jalen Hurts is this kid could be boom or bust, probably closer to the middle, but the ceiling or maybe the expectation of a ceiling that's not there, it's not worth it for me to take him so early in these drafts for a team that could easily just win 5 or 6 games.
He's an interesting one because I do think, when you have unknown, to me, the range of outcomes is bigger and he is mobile. I do like that. But again, I think he falls into a trap of a lot of people. And we see this across all sports in PGA as well. A new guy comes from the Korn Ferry. We got to get on him immediately. And sometimes that kind of creates a situation where the opportunity cost is pretty big. He's in that Stafford range, and friend of the show brings up in chat that Stafford's ceiling is massive yardage, no doubt. He's a 0 with rushing though. And again, I still think he's a little heavy in terms of that ADP. It's not like these guys don't have it. And I'm interested to see what Hurts does. He's got a lot of new weapons on the outside. Of course, we'll see with Smith, we'll see with Rager. But I see where you're going there in terms of, could it be reasonable for him to be in that next tier kind of QB 15, 16, 17, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if that's where I could get him.
I'm not going to bury another position here, but I don't think that it's by coincidence that one of the guys he is expected to throw to might make your list of a player to not throw the football to, or draft in this case. Devontae Smith is hurt. Jalen Reagor just got yelled at by 3 different coaches today, so take that for what it's worth in all of it. And look, there are others, but I think the beauty of what we're doing today is providing you a glance into each position, and then hopefully you can use the mentality that Ben here, and I'm just following along, that we're pushing, which is don't always look at a guy that you don't want to draft or shouldn't draft because he stinks. Look at the return that you're getting where you take him. And I think that's a big connection here to running backs, especially for the name that you have on this list, because again, we talk about public or maybe fading the public. I imagine that your name is pretty popular as far as people drafting, not necessarily on the do not draft list.
No doubt about it. My running back is Josh Jacobs, who to me, I'm a fan as everyone else is. In DFS, played him a lot, like what he's doing, bell cow guy. And I expect a lot of opportunities. Once again, his ADP is sitting around 30. I totally seal that. It's just, once again, we're looking about who else is in that area. Well, you've got the David Montgomerys, the Miles Sanders, the Chris Carsons of the world. If you want to go to the outside, Allen Robinson might be available. Waller is right by there. Keenan Allen. And to me, first of all, the Raiders are a situation. We'll see what's up with Kenyon Drake. I'm always a Kenyon Drake homer. He does come in maybe to alleviate some of that. I think he will be a better backup than Jalen Richard, who to me really couldn't touch Josh Jacobs in terms of siphoning carries. The other thing, I really don't like this offensive line. And you know what? I've watched enough Bengals football out there. You know, I'm a Joe Mixon guy. I don't care how good you are. If you have no time and no holes, it doesn't really matter. So you look at Jacobs, he's getting a little better with the pass catching, but he's still not someone that I kind of consider a dual threat back. I think he's just a little heavy at 30. It's that same situation. I wouldn't mind getting him if he fell. I would actually look to snag him if he was in the Kareem Hunt range, something like that, around 50. But to really pay up for possibly like a third round pick there, I'm not super sold on it. And I think that he and the Raiders in general could have a pretty disappointing season.
If you're on the board and you have, okay, so maybe I'll rephrase this, because there was a name that you mentioned last week as far as a really strong sleeper, maybe even a more obvious sleeper, but still one worth a mention at that position. And I'm looking at where Mike Davis is being drafted on average. Mm-hmm. And I immediately think of Mike Davis when you're laying out guys below Josh Jacobs' ADP that you can get similar, if not better, productivity, especially if you're looking at a best ball scenario where you just need two guys of your roster to pop. If you're having somebody that you can afford to take in a round or maybe two later to get the same level of productivity, then it screams stay away from Jacobs.
And that's really what we're talking about here. If you don't take Josh Jacobs in that spot, you're getting one of those weapons that we've talked about. And then when you pay down in a couple rounds for a Mike Davis, for a Melvin Gordon, well, you're going to be ahead of the game if they can cancel out Josh Jacobs, because the player that you drafted there is certainly going to be better than who you would be looking at in that 65 to 70 range when you're getting that running back instead. So to me, the opportunity is there to maybe wait. And again, I can't stress enough in this video, you have to be able to react on the fly when you're doing these drafts. Sometimes a guy, for whatever reason, falls, and he's on a list of mine where I say, I'm not really high on this guy, but I still end up with him on my team because now I say, okay, the risk is worth the reward. And that's something you always want to be able to audible. Don't just be stuck firmly, this guy's off my board. Everyone's in play at some position. It's just where they're going normally to me is too high.
So my back is using a little bit of benefit of hindsight here. And it's more walking the line of don't draft this guy where he was initially an ADP and recognizing that maybe people are catching on because his ADP has fallen a little bit. Now, look, nobody's going to argue the talent of Saquon Barkley. This kid is unique in a lot of areas where you can throw the football to and utilize him outside of just in the backfield. He also is a workhorse when it comes to carrying the football. But let's look at this Giants team. This season is really about Daniel Jones. This season is really about figuring out who the hell you have if you have a body or somebody you need to get rid of at the quarterback position. They bring in Galladay, they draft a kid. You know that they are going to throw the football and ask Jones to throw the football probably a little more than we would want or even the Giants would be comfortable with. But also you have to factor in the injury history. We don't necessarily know how fast Saquon Barkley will be 100%. So if you want to stash him, if it's more of a best ball strategy, I accept that. But if you're looking for your bell cow, your workhorse to pop week to week, or if you're looking at, taking advantage of drafting a DFS weekly lineup here, yes, I think you can get the same level of productivity from Nick Chubb, from Jonathan Taylor. I would even stretch it and say Aaron Jones. I know that everybody's up in arms about what could the Packers be and all, but Rodgers is back. So I look at it like the grouping of it and saying not that I would drop 10 to 15 slots below, like we just talked about with Mike Davis, Ben. I'm looking at it like who's immediately around Saquon Barkley. And if I have the opportunity to draft Chubb, Taylor, Barkley, or Jones, I know it sounds crazy, and we've disagreed. You haven't called me an idiot yet. Maybe this is the time, but I would put Barkley at the bottom of that list, even knowing I would take a risk with Jones above Barkley.
I got one more for you. I'm interested because I'm looking at the same names you are. What about Zeke?
Yes, absolutely. I think Ezekiel Elliott is just prime for a bounce back season. And I think this is where the public had, now ADP will tell you otherwise, right? But I just feel like there's a general narrative that Ezekiel Elliott is done, that he's cooked because of last year. So yeah, if you have the opportunity, like so for your example, you draft 5. Let's just look at this hypothetically, right? You're drafting 5. The easy ones are off the board. McCaffrey, Cook, Henry, Kamara, depending on the order. Now, what do? I would look at it similarly how this is played out with ADP and pretty much say Elliott, flip a coin between Chubb and Taylor. I would take Aaron Jones over Barkley at this point. Honestly, I know that that's not necessarily a huge reach, but yeah, definitely Ezekiel Elliott at the top of that crop.
So I'm with you. I would have Barkley a little higher than you, but I like Zeke and Chubb firmly over him. And again, now when you
Taylor,
get
let me clarify. After what's happened in Indianapolis, that's my fault, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Take Taylor off the list at this point. Yes.
Yeah, Indy's just an absolute. Quentin Nelson in a boot is possibly more detrimental in some ways than Carson. So
you're right.
When you talk about a situation up top, though, you mentioned I'm talking about 15 spots difference. When you're picking in that first round, I mean, 5 to 7 is enough. Like if you were seeing Saquon go 5th and you have him a couple spots behind, that's value in itself. And I think the situation, and you got some fans in chat, Thomas Revere also on the Aaron Jones over Saquon train. I think that obviously coming off an injury, there's more questions than answers. The only thing I've heard about the Giants so far is they got into a giant melee. I don't know. It doesn't seem good. Apparently the quarterback was at the bottom of the pile. They got to get their troops in order there, get Joe Judge to I don't know what, do something, because that's not a good sign. But yeah, listen, Saquon's a fantastic player, but there are injury concerns. And again, that is the ultimate premium. When you're talking first round, your top player, it's tough to take a reach there or take even a risk. You want stability, you want floor. You certainly want to minimize that risk. And Saquon is risky for various reasons. So I have no problem with that. In line, actually, I have several running backs behind him, ahead of him, as you do as well.
Let's get to wide receiver here. And this one's interesting. I think both of our names here are going to spark some conversation. And this is one where I saw yours and I salivating to hear the explanation, because I feel like I should have listened to this show and you specifically before I went out and rostered this guy in a couple of best ball drafts on Underdog.
So I'm glad you brought that up. This is why, chat, we've got some synergy on this show. I want to clarify this because my guy is Chase Claypool. And I think in best ball, this guy is a buy, because I wouldn't be stunned at all to see him have monster weeks, a couple of them. And he's on a milli winning lineup for DFS teams a couple times. But I think with me, when I look at a week to week in a season long setting, the touchdown variance, I think, is due to regress. He had 13 last year on 67 receptions. That's a little ridiculous. Now, he could take a step forward. He's a damn good player, and I do like the Steelers offense. I do think Najee Harris will be able to stabilize that backfield better, and particularly around the goal line. Some of those touchdowns are going in on the ground this year. I think there's no doubt about it. So when I look at Claypool, I like his upside. I like his ceiling in specific weeks, but I think week to week, you're going to get a lot of dud games. And an ADP sitting firmly around 70, you've got Odell there, who, again, I also think is maybe a little overvalued, but you've got T. Higgins I really like. You've got Ayuk right above them, Shark, Devontae Smith, Cortland Sutton, who could be a bounce back candidate in Denver. There's a lot of names there. So it's nothing against Chase Claypool specifically. I just think he ran really good last year for a variety of reasons. And for that, I'm comfortable shorting him, particularly in season long. I think in best ball, he's a much easier roster.
When you look at the maybe defining metric for you in choosing Chase Claypool here, I'm curious, how much of it is Deontay Johnson, other guys around him, right? Even Juju, who's been relegated to a lesser role, but a pretty damn good guy to have in that role. How much of it is just targets versus the quarterback play, which wasn't brutal by any means with Big Ben last year, but we know that this is probably it. And we've seen guys fall off in their final year or so. So I don't know if you've looked at either or both, or maybe one more than the other.
Yeah, it's certainly a combination. I think the first thing, you just mentioned it, they've got a lot of talent at these skill positions, and it's not like, okay, it's got to be Claypool. I don't believe that at all. Juju, Deontay Johnson, and again, I'm going to throw Najee Harris into the mix.
Yes,
I think he could siphon off a lot of volume in the goal line. I don't think they want Big Ben dropping back 50 plus. He threw 68 times in that playoff game. Now I know they were behind the entire time, but that's just stupid. I think that Claypool will have a fine year. He could have a couple blow up games, but week to week, I don't know if he's going to run that as good as he was last year. So for that reason, again, I think the public is really, really high on him right now. I'm going to kind of go the other way and wait a little bit.
Steelers 375 to win that division.
I think they have a chance.
375.
I may look to bet the Steelers to finish last in that division.
Above Cincinnati. You're that much of a Burrow honk.
No, Burrow. I love Joe Burrow. Talk about friend of the show said Steelers O-line is a dumpster fire. Hard to hit Claypool when Big Ben on his back. Totally agree with that. Poor Joe Burrow is also going to have that same treatment this year. That O-line is an absolute mess, but that division I think is a 2-horse race, Brownies and Ravens.
All right, so let's flip to my wide receiver. And again, I feel like this is the theme here, where we have to clarify. It's not that I think Allen Robinson is not a good wide receiver. Ooh. It's not that I think that he can't get, and I see Ben shaking his head, so the idiot might come out today. You never know, right? But here, because you already mentioned Fields, the reality is we don't even know who's starting, although we probably think it's Andy Dalton right now, and that doesn't give him much hope. It's really, really hard to play that position in Chicago. There's a reason why Jim McMahon say QBs go to die at Soldier Field in Chicago now. So I look at the combination of what could help Allen Robinson, and that's consistency at that position. We don't have that. That's really figuring out what this offense is outside of one back that I think they will work a lot in Montgomery. But even then, we've seen that this offense, if you can't throw consistently, is going to be a problem. You can't just dump the ball off to Robinson 35 times a game and watch his numbers fly. It's not going to work that way. And then lastly, look, I'll give you the benefit and others the benefit of the doubt, which is Andy Dalton ain't making it the whole year. This is a Justin Fields team at some point. The problem is that, and look, I'm appealing to you and all the people who have covered and watched and followed this league. You don't just step in week 6 and dominate the NFL. Jalen Hurts did for a half and maybe like the half of the next game, and then everybody caught up to him. So I can't rely on all of this not unknown uncertainty surrounding the quarterback position to really bank on Allen Robinson so high as like a top 10 wide receiver, Ben.
I think it's totally reasonable. I definitely think of all the players that we mentioned, Allen Robinson has an opportunity to be absolutely ceiling level wide receiver in fantasy if Fields turns out to be great and early. And I think that is possible. What I did is actually I mitigated it a different way. I really like Darnell Mooney because I think the risk is not nearly as much, but the ceiling is still there. If this passing attack is fantastic, you're going to get paid off with Robinson, but you'll also get paid off with Mooney. But if it's not, say Dalton plays deep into the year or Fields is ineffective, it's a lot better to say, man, Mooney was a miss than Robinson was a miss. Robinson's going to be a key piece of your team this year if you choose to draft him, as you mentioned, as basically a top 10 wide receiver going around 37, 38 in ADP. You've got McLaurin there. You've got CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, Julio on Tennessee, Michael Thomas was hurt, obviously, Amare. There's a lot of other names. So I think the way I classify Allen Robinson, huge risk, I think bigger reward than you, but there is no doubt that's, this lack of stability at the QB position gives a lot of scenarios where it doesn't end well in Chicago for any of the pass catchers.
So I'll bring up the point you made earlier at the running back position, or no, I think it was with Claypool, same scenario here, which is it's not that I don't like, I actually do like. I have entertained myself on a couple of underdog best ball drafts of looking at that late stack to take Fields later and Mooney, Cole Kmet, if you can get him a Graham similar. So you're probably not going to get Robinson late unless you actively know that you're drafting Robinson early to bring on Fields and maybe Mooney as that later Bears stack. But I think there's a lot of value, especially in best ball drafts, where these guys could hit that ceiling. But to invest for like a season long and have that as your number one or maybe two wide receiver, it's just too much for me for Robinson. So yeah. I think that there is always going to be middle ground where you can work around if it's best ball or simply weekly as opposed to the season long.
I mean, it's just worth saying, and it's pretty obvious, of course, but like, you know, the higher you take a player, the more narrow your path is and the more risk you incur. Like if you're in the late rounds and you quote unquote reach for a guy, what's the worst that's going to happen realistically? You miss and life moves on. If you quote unquote reach or really hone in on someone early, if you get that wrong, it's going to set your team back a lot. And I think that's the thing in Chicago in general. All of them have ample opportunities, but if it goes terribly, the worst guy to have is going to be Allen Robinson. And the best Bear to have is going to be, you know, someone that you didn't pay a huge premium to get because you say, okay, it wasn't for me and it didn't work. But it's going to come down to Justin Fields, who I love Justin Fields. I really hope he's great. We're going to see, though, as you mentioned, you don't just come into the NFL and start torching things. That rarely, if ever, happens.
All right. Now, are you trolling me here with this last selection?
No, I don't. You're going to have to educate me on the fly here with tight end as we move on, because maybe I just think that Zach Ertz is better than everybody else in the world. But Dallas Goedert, right. Tight end 7, going inside the top 100 in ADP. And to me, it's not a given. It's not a given that he's just, okay, he is going to just dominate target share with this team. You already brought up, talk about instability at the quarterback position. You know, Jalen Hurts may not just be, he might be an ineffective passer. Not to mention you've got Rager, who I think is primed for a bigger year. Devonta Smith certainly is going to be busy. You've got Sanders who can catch the ball. I just think that Zach Ertz could siphon off a lot of this. This is a way too high price tag for me, unless I'm missing something. This is your account. What do you make of Dallas Goedert this year?
I think from a standpoint, this is one of these guys who I think is going to have numbers when it's all said and done. And for the box score watchers, they're probably thinking, Rasa, you're out of your mind. But from a DFS standpoint, I wouldn't touch him, especially like best ball. I think you have the opportunity to work him in if you can get him later in the draft. But if we're talking about season long, if we're talking about Dallas Goedert being your number one tight end, then no. This is the reverse, I think, of what we've been talking about, Ben, where earlier in the show and throughout, we're talking about a guy at like 13 and saying, whoa, stay away from him because you can get the same level of productivity at 20 or at 50. I think with Goddard, where he's drafting, it's like, no, don't wait to take that risk. You're better off overdrafting at that position or just waiting until the end and getting like a Fursker or maybe like a Henry in that regard. I wouldn't touch Dallas Goedert from a DFS standpoint, to your point, because I don't know what the rapport is between Jalen Hurts and Dallas Goedert. Yeah, it stunk last year, but Carson Wentz loved throwing to tight ends. I don't know if that's going to be Jalen Hurts this year. So I'm with you. I think that there's way too much of this gray area, and it's not enticing gray area to bet on for me.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and then I want to ask about your guy before we duck on out of here. It's not like linear with this stuff. Like the way tight end looks, it looks like you've got 5 guys hovering around the top 50 in ADP. And then to me, it falls off a cliff. You kind of have Hawkinson sitting there, but you bring up a point. If you don't get one of those 5 or 6, I would wait a long time and take a flyer on a Higbee or a Henry or a million other guys that I think you could get literally 100, 75 to 100 spots after Dallas Goedert. And I don't think, yes, is he probably a favorite to outscore them this year? But it's no lock. It's not minus 500. I'd put him as a slight favorite. And the opportunity there is a ridiculous, you're drafting him several rounds ahead of all those other guys. So if you're not going to go and get Kelsey or Kittle or, Mark Andrews or even Pitts, one of those type of guys, I'd say punt tight end and just wait because there's a million other guys that you can get in the later rounds.
All right, I'm going to keep this one short and sweet here. And again, before we get out, just a quick reminder to hit up Underdog if you haven't already. Yes. The $3.5 million prize pool with over $1 million going to first place. Use our promo code Awesemo. You'll get the free $25 to use right away. Look, I have a rule here, right? And it's narrative based. Okay. So bear with me. If you piss off a coach to the extent where you're involved in a brawl in the preseason and you're not a top 3 at your position, I'm fading your ass all day in DFS. All right. Look, we just talked about this with the Giants and why I would stay away from Barkley, because I don't think he's going to get as many receptions or at least looks in a PPR league. Evan Engram is way too low on the food chain to get the football, and he's not good enough to distance or separate himself from defenses in order for you to rely on him being the reason why he overachieves. I don't like anything about betting or taking, I should say, in a draft, Evan Engram, especially following his involvement in the latest that had Joe Judge blowing multiple gaskets.
Part of me died inside. I love Evan Engram in life.
This is your guy, huh?
I can't quit him. And he cost me a lot. He's on the list of people who definitely cost me the most money over my DFS career. There's no doubt about it.
More than Sam Querrey?
Thank God I can't play tennis DFS, because Sam Querrey, he's cost me things in life more than DFS. It's a bad situation. Listen, what can you say? I've bet on Evan Engram to no success. Coming out of Ole Miss, I thought he was just the exactly prototypical hybrid tight end. But he's on a team you already mentioned. They've got other priorities in terms of skill position players, and the offense in general might not be able to really function with Daniel Jones. It's still a work in progress at best. So is he athletic? Does he have a couple runs every couple of weeks where it's like, wow, this guy, he flashes it, but he struggles with drops at times. He struggles with lack of target share at times. I don't really see it. I have no interest in him where he's at. I'm with you there. I do think he will have some value maybe in DFS circles if his price is depressed, if he struggles to start the year, but it's hard to argue with the facts. And the facts is right now, Giants offense is very difficult to trust for a variety of reasons, and that includes my boy, Evan Engram.
Look, you bring up something real quick, and I'll just re-emphasize it on the way out, which is he's not a bad punt option if he's struggling for the first couple of weeks, because the number will reflect that. Where in a tournament, all of a sudden, you can get him like minimum if he's really off, right, having a couple of bad weeks. Probably a little more than that. And then all of a sudden you get a really good value on him. So look, I'm willing to budge. All right. I'm not a rock. I don't stay in one spot for 33 minutes and you can't move me, Rasa. Okay.
No, that's what you got to do. You have to be dynamic with these players because again, it's not, oh, this guy sucks and don't draft him under any circumstance. So that's probably not going to be the factors that you want when you're talking season long to best ball, to DFS, to betting. Well, I'm sure the guy's got some value somewhere if something opens up. But hopefully today, like I said, if nothing else, it just makes you guys think about, okay, where am I drafting these guys and what is the opportunity cost by doing so? Because when you do that, I think you can really make more effective teams and certainly be able to react on the fly, which is always the name of the game.
Ben Rasa on Twitter at JazzRazDFS, at Shander Show for me. Make sure you thank us by simply leaving us a like and subscribing to the channel. Make sure you thank Jordan in the chat for doing a fantastic job producing. Hit up Underdog if you haven't already, and we'll all be back for another fantasy football show tomorrow, 2 o'clock Eastern, right here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. See you.
Evan Engram, one time, just do it this year. One time.